esta pena ya dejemos ya.
Well, I want to thank you, San Antonio. We're here again. You know, right now we're in a crisis. It's a national crisis, so it's sort of an awakening of what I've been trying to identify as far as why our nation is having this mental health crisis. Now they're trying to push it into an opioid crisis because they can't identify what the Department of Justice has as a best practice in our society, and what we try to say why our veterans were killing themselves, and that was because of this psychotropic epidemic that's being done in our justice system against children. But we're having an awakening, and even here today, our president-elect, Donald Trump, had a young lady who fell into the opioid epidemic, but he identifies the crisis. Let me let you watch this.
Vanessa Vitolo, the opioid addiction started with painkillers and quickly escalated.
I was a full-blown heroin and crack addict, and I was very, very close to my family growing up, but I isolated myself.
Her painful story, part of Governor Chris Christie's campaign, meant to highlight new addiction treatment services in the state of New Jersey, and one she shared today at the White House.
I come from a small town in South Jersey.
Her visit, part of President Trump's listening session focused on combating opioid and drug abuse.
It's hard to believe that you're living on the streets.
The president tapping Governor Christie to lead a commission on the epidemic. Former Yankees closer Mariano Rivera and his foundation also part of the team.
Drug abuse has become a crippling problem throughout the United States. Drug overdoses are now the leading cause of accidental death in our country.
Christie, who endorsed Trump but was later dropped from the transition team, has made drug addiction a priority, recently signing one of the nation's most comprehensive laws to combat the crisis.
I think the president and I both agree that addiction is a disease, and it's a disease that can be treated.
And that's the message Vanessa brought to the table, a message of hope.
I'm sitting across from you right now. 3 years ago, I didn't have a place to live. And today I'm here to represent the light that can be born out of the defeat of this darkness. There is hope, and there is a tomorrow.
And there he showed you that we are in a crisis, but it's not because of what the opioids are. It's the damages of psychotropics. These kids are being put on these psychotropics, and because of what we identified, and even when we worked on the Mercy Act with Senator Cory Booker, we identified then psychotropic damages that part of the cerebellum, to where in 2012 it showed that veterans would have to self-medicate, whether it be through alcohol, marijuana, or just the damages of what we're trying to say today. And we need to really, really come to the realization here, as far as this task force that they have, steering away from what the matters of fact are. So let him tell you what was happening.
There are days when I feel like a prisoner of hope, and I look to those buildings, that building, for inspiration. Because it says on that building, staring at the Senate, equal justice under law. And so I came to Washington having been a mayor of a city who, I'm sorry, child after child after child, I see they're not receiving the justice from environmental toxins like lead in our water and our soil and our air that is directly correlated not just with not doing well in education, but getting involved in the criminal justice system. I see kids, not just environmental toxins, but the trauma of just living in a community. I wept watching Newtown and seeing rightfully the waves of psychologists that descended to help those children deal with that trauma, but yet I have kids suffering post-traumatic stress because of violence that they might have witnessed. I became intimately familiar that the challenges we put before our greatest natural resource in this country, not oil and gas, in a global knowledge-based economy, is the genius of our children. The pitfalls, the cracks the jagged edges of a broken criminal justice system that scar so many of our children. I came to Washington and felt great that there was momentum working on criminal justice reform, that there was coalitions that are rare, from the Christian conservatives to fiscal conservatives to liberals to libertarians, to join with them to try to actually get something passed. And I'm proud that I was able to get a bipartisan bill on this issue, the Mercy Act, with people like Durbin and Lee. I mean, when you get Durbin and Lee to get together on a bill, I mean, Utah meets Chicago. It's a very impressive thing.
Mr. Booker referenced there that, it's equal justice, and to know that we're doing this to kids, and it's caused not an opioid epidemic. This is a psychotropic, inhumane process that we had ruled here in Texas. The judge in the Texas foster care said that the psychotropics are making members not functional. And when you have these kids coming out of the prisons not functional, of course, I showed you in my last show the young man that came out of the prison. His mom said that he had a mental health crisis due to the traumatizing he had suffered. These psychotropics are going to destroy us if we don't grab a hold of this and call these people, as far as our leaders, our senators, our representatives, even the governor, and ask them, why are we using psychotropics? Send a letter to President Trump. But let you listen to this young man.
This is Dr. Peter Breggin, and this is another in my Simple Truths about psychiatry. And the subject today is that psychiatric drugs are much, much more dangerous than you've ever been led to believe by the doctors who are prescribing them. I genuinely believe that if most people knew how dangerous the psychiatric drugs really were, most people would never start on them. And I also believe that if most prescribers had even the faintest idea how dangerous they were, they'd stop prescribing them. Well, how is it that so many people can be ignorant about psychiatric drugs? Well, the truth is because they're all getting their information from the drug companies. I mean, when was the last time you saw a car company leap up to tell people way in advance that they'd had some deaths on the road from their bad brakes? When was the last time the car companies went mea culpa and said, yes, our accelerators are sticking and running people down? Well, I can tell you the drug companies are even worse. They go to all kinds of extremes to avoid letting you know and letting your doctor know how dangerous the drugs are. I know this because I've been a medical expert in dozens of lawsuits against drug companies. I've looked inside drug companies and seen what they're really doing. I was appointed by a court in Indiana to be the scientific expert for over 150 lawsuits against Eli Lilly, suits alleging that the drug Prozac had caused violence, suicide, mayhem, mania, and psychosis. So I know what goes inside. I know as much as anyone about how dangerous the drugs are. So let me just give you a little brief outline of material you can find in the first half of my book, Psychiatric Drug Withdrawal. Obviously, the second half is intended to help you come off psychiatric drugs, because it can be very dangerous to come off drugs. It's dangerous and sometimes more than starting the drugs. Let's take a look at the stimulants that you may be taking as a college student or as a parent that you may be giving to your children. Follow-up studies on people who were started on stimulants as children show that they have shrinkage of brain tissue, measurable on brain scans. They have reduced height and weight. They're being incarcerated more often than other people. They're going to mental hospitals more often. Their suicide rate is increased. Every single one of these facts documented by follow-up studies of what happens to you if you get started on stimulants. And one particularly well-done study, the rate of cocaine abuse is greater when you become a young man or woman if you've been put on stimulants as a child. That's because the stimulant drugs, such as Ritalin and Concerta and Adderall and Dexedrine, they're so similar to cocaine in their effects. All right, let's look at another group, the sedative, sleeping pills that you're taking, like Sonata and Ambien, any one of the prescription sedatives used for sleep. We now got 2 or more good studies showing they shorten lifespan. You can Google them. You can Google practically anything I'm telling you, but you'll get more accurate and direct data from psychiatric drug withdrawal. Now, what about the benzodiazepines, the tranquilizers like Xanax and Valium and Ativan and Klonopin? They're very addictive. You know that people taking Xanax in controlled clinical trials, after a mere 6 weeks, a large percentage can't get off. After a mere 6 weeks, they become addicts to Xanax. Great for the drug business, great for your psychiatrist or prescriber who just wants to write prescriptions. Terrible for you. These drugs now, several studies show, like Xanax and Ativan, they're causing shrinkage of the brain too. Coming off them can be an absolute horror story. It can be harder to get off those drugs than to get off opiates. They leave people who try to come off of them with horrendous insomnia, horrendous anxiety, aches and pains in their body, such pain in their feet that they can't stand up, that it's just too much pain, weird feelings throughout their body, and then the realization as they come off that their minds aren't working as well, that they have memory loss for the past and have more trouble learning. Now, I know this is hard. You know, it's hard for me to even talk about it, but it's really time to face up to just how dangerous these drugs are. So we've looked at the stimulants and the sleeping pills and the benzos. Now the antipsychotic drugs, which are not really antipsychotic drugs, they're just lobotomizing drugs that are being given to some people for sleep, like Seroquel is being given to people for sleep, and Abilify and Latuda and Risperdal and Zyprexa. All of these drugs are very damaging to the brain. They virtually wreck a part of the brain called the basal ganglia. They cause a dreadful disorder, tardive dyskinesia. I've done a whole Simple Truth video about tardive dyskinesia. They're shortening the lifespan. We have evidence that people who are put on a lifetime dose of these antipsychotic drugs for whatever reason, whether it's to help you sleep at night or because that you're hallucinating and have a lot of problems, 20 years shortened lifespan. And we know some of the ways the lifespan's being shortened, because especially these newer antipsychotics, so-called second generation or atypical antipsychotics, they're even worse than the older ones in causing a metabolic syndrome. People get obese, they get diabetes, they get pancreatitis, they get elevated cholesterol, blood pressure is off. And then, since the drugs also cause heart arrhythmias and in combination with other drugs do even more cardiovascular damage, that's one of the ways in which people are having shortened lifespan on these drugs. The mood stabilizers, so-called, which are just flattening, emotionally flattening drugs. Most of them were originally anti-seizure drugs. The one we've studied for the longest time is lithium. If you stay on lithium for a lifetime, like your doctor tells you to, you're at grave risk of severe mental problems in the form of memory difficulties, learning new materials, conducting your affairs like you have your whole life. None of these drugs are good for your brain. All of these drugs are bad for your brain, and it shouldn't be any surprise. These drugs are producing multiple biochemical imbalances in brains that don't have any biochemical imbalance until a physician or prescriber puts you on the drug. Now, please don't just stop taking your drugs, because the ultimate tragedy is that coming off of them can be catastrophic. People can get suicidal, they can get violent. Some of the drugs, you can get seizures. Some of the drugs can drop your blood pressure if you're coming off. So, get good information. I put everything I know about it in psychiatric drug withdrawal. Get good information. Get some good clinical supervision. Work with your family or friends. The shorter time you're on psychiatric drugs almost certainly means that you'll have a better quality of life.
That young man explained to you the damages of what these psychotropics are doing, and it's turned into murder-suicide. Our society has something that's never been, I've had to read reports where a young lady processed in because her mother's a drug addict into the foster care, put on psychotropics, processed into prison, comes home and cuts her mother's head off. She'll do life. Even when I started, when they did this to my son, the young man killed his father, and I went to Lisa Jarrett. She was the juvenile judge who was going to make the decision to bound this young man over to the adult system. And I thought, somebody please, acknowledge what's wrong here. He didn't kill his father. And we can't have our leaders saying, as far as running their campaign and saying that, this is the city we deserve. So when we listen to, and this is why you need to call these people and call the mayor, because what we try to do when we try to stabilize the situation, when we brought the identity to former Mayor Taylor, and she wouldn't listen to us, but Mr. Nuremberg ran his campaign on the city we deserve. So, we're there on the west side and we're enduring this. So let me let you listen to what he had to say.
First, where we start is an education effort for our entire community. I think one positive element of what's happened here today is that we're raising the level of attention on what has become a national crisis.
And he steered away from what we tried to explain to Mr. Wolf, the people there from Baptist, even those that had the contract when I had to advocate for the Casey Foundation and trying to bring the awareness of, what my son endured with these people, violating his rights. And that's why, I wrote the Constitutional Protection Zone, and that ordinance is there. And I want you to call our representative, because it seems like the whole of this group on here is, besides Shirley Gonzalez, of course, she's on the west side. We also have Ray Saldana. And if this violence is happening in these areas, and you can look very specifically as to where even just the homicides, just the increase that made us the most violent city that we managed to steer away from or not be able to put our finger on it. Even the chief said, I can't put my finger on why these kids are killing each other. Well, we did. And, this is happening there on our streets. And yet it's not being brought to the forefront because our leaders are saying what, you just heard him say. And you need to tell him, do you think maybe the majority of this opioid is because we damaged the children's minds with psychotropic drugs? And now they're going to have to self-medicate and live with this liability? As to why they're not talking about this, they're not going to talk about it because they're doing this, and I don't know if it's for profit or what it is. I just know it's more of a crime for me to see this. And then to even have to live it because, I'm here on the west side, advocating and, trying to reach out to our representatives to bring change as far as the equities of what hasn't been. Now they are in this new budget. And what about what we kept trying to say even since 2007 when they were molesting children in the Texas Youth Commission? And, of course, Mary Jane fought them to the end. I showed you last year the work she did, and now is having to care for her son that'll live with schizophrenia with the rest of his life. We're still trying to help Sarah Garcia, whose son will live with the lithiums that have destroyed his mind. And yet we're still not getting these people to accept that what we're living with there on the west side. And let me let you watch this.
First on Fox, a family torn apart by tragedy as a man, a woman, and their dog are all shot and killed outside their west side home. The shooting happened just after 3 this afternoon on the corner of Delgado and Northwest 26th Street. Our Melissa Vega has learned more about the victims tonight. She's live at police headquarters with the latest on this investigation. Melissa.
We spoke to the sister of the woman who was shot and killed. She says her sister was 34 years old, a mother of 4, and had just moved back to San Antonio from Dallas a couple of months ago. And as the family tries to comprehend how this happened, police are still searching for that shooter.
Deceased by the time officers arrived.
Police say the gunman also shot and killed the family dog. Darlene Robinson's 8-year-old daughter was also inside the black Chevy Tahoe at the time of the shooting.
The bullet had grazed her finger and the glass hit her in the ear.
Lorena says her sister's 15-year-old daughter was also outside hiding behind the Tahoe.
She had to beg for her life so he wouldn't shoot her. Right now she's in shock and taking it very hard, you know. She's only 15, so.
This is still a very active investigation as police continue to search for the shooter. Police haven't released a motive for that shooting, but they do believe the victims and the shooter did know each other. The victim's family says they believe they know who the suspect is also, and they're fearful for Robinson's 4 children.
I'm scared for their life because I don't know what his mentality is right now, and that's what scares me.
The family hopes and prays he'll soon be off the streets.
We need justice.
And police haven't released much information about the suspect. Again, police haven't released much information about the suspect, only that he left the scene in a dark-colored car. But again, police are still looking for him. Reporting live downtown tonight, Melissa Vega, Fox News at 9.
This is happening throughout our city, and we don't have leaders putting the point of matter as far as these are young men and women that are killing each other. And this isn't just here, this is throughout the state. You know, Cory Booker's campaign, you can watch it, Stop Solitary Confinement for Kids. It's posted on YouTube, just Google it. And they're saying 90% of the jails in the United States, that's all the United States, have a mental health crisis. And due to solitary, but it's not. This is that cover-up. When you watch it, you understand what I'm saying. When you see these types of killings going on here, and even in Von Army, let you watch this.
Not a day goes by that I don't think about it.
Amora Stevens' big brother, 22-year-old Terrell Stevens, was shot in the head in December at a birthday party in Von Army.
I miss that my birthday just passed and didn't get a phone call from him, that he wasn't here on Easter. I just miss everything.
Stevens was trying to stop 2 women from fighting, and that's when deputies say this man, 19-year-old Jonathan Avila, shot into the crowd. Stevens died in the street.
I know you're a young kid and stuff. I know you got parents, but you didn't have to do this to my son.
Police say when Avila fired into the crowd, he not only killed Stevens, but hit one man in the back and shot this 13-year-old girl in the face. Both victims survived, even though the bullet ended up lodged in Coral Lopez's head. She woke up from her coma 6 days later.
Well, I'm pretty good, but sometimes with this helmet, like I wear it because I had to have protection because I'm a snipe his skull.
Cordell's aunt is grateful authorities finally made an arrest.
He can't just go around and shoot people and think he's going to get away with it. Eventually it catches up to you, and I'm so glad this guy's off the streets now because he could have done it to anybody else.
After 4 months of intense searching, deputies tracked Avila to Mexico. Stevens' family says they're not surprised he was in hiding.
Just a month ago, I would go through that guy's Facebook, which is Jonathan Avila. He would put live life with no regrets and all this, like he didn't care.
Christina Coleman, Fox News at 9.
And, you know, this is a small little town, but we're having these kids maybe happening for a reason, and we as the citizens have to ask them, why the hell are we using psychotropic drugs on children? If it's identified in what the work we did in 2012 when the 22 veterans were killing themselves, wouldn't that be a lifeline to help say that the opioid is not what we need to be addressing, but why opioids become what is being done with our veterans to self-medicate because of the damage. They had PTSD, they had to take psychotropics. And that means even when we did the work with Commissioner Atkinson, with the Veterans Court, we still are using psychotropics. Even though we won the lawsuit in the Texas foster care that they didn't even address, even in the special session. They did not say one word about 12,000 kids. That was 2011 to 2015 when the Texan of the Year, she ruled in favor of the kids. And it said psychotropics are making members not functional. And I don't care about Center for Healthcare Services and how long they've been here and partnered with Paul Elizondo Center for Healthcare Services. We know that Laura Parker said it was the University of Texas Health Science that had the contract with the county to keep our community safe. Call and ask them, are we having these psychotropic drugs as a best practice under the care umbrella of the state of Texas that Governor Greg Abbott said it's our duty, and this is part of my duty, and why I've developed the ESP project, Building America's Future. And I'm going to run this to Washington and ask President Obama to meet with the Native Americans that we'd like to build the colonias and build an eco-friendly, affordable housing model. Instead of building a wall, give us the opportunity to take our veterans to end this war with big pharma's psychotropics against America's children. I know we can do this, but I'm going to need your help. So please call your representatives and let peace be with us all. And here's a song for my brother.